And this is a story that I was an active part of because it's based on true facts. And to convey the true facts of this story, as you will see, I wrote a story, and that's the one I'm going to tell you about it now. But it's based entirely upon what you're going to hear actually happen. It's set in northern central India 45 years ago. Northern central India is a very remote area, and 45 years ago there were very few roads and many, many, many villages. And to get from village to village, you literally walked paths from village to village, and perhaps you rode a bicycle. This particular story occurs in a Christian mission hospital that's located right in the very heart of central North India. It's surrounded, it's the only hospital in the entire area for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. And so the villagers think of it as their place to go. Now there, if you are sick, and it's such a remote area, to get to the hospital, you cannot get in your car. You need to walk to the hospital. If you're really quite sick, you may need to be put into a bullock cart and taken by cart many days to the hospital. And when I was there, I saw people brought by their families on beds because they were too ill to walk, and they would come to this hospital. And why did they come to the hospital? Because in that hospital was a famous surgeon. We'll call him Dr. Tom. And Dr. Tom had been a doctor in this hospital for many years. His fame as a surgeon and as a fixer was legendary. And so people did not think twice about picking somebody up and going for days walking, because they knew that Dr. Tom would cure them and fix them. Unfortunately, as you know, doctors can't fix everybody, and they can't heal everybody. But the belief among the villagers was that Tom could do it. The thinking that Tom had was that he could provide the services that were required, and pretty well he could look after everybody that came. And like I said, we were there with him, and we saw him do some amazing things with not a lot of equipment. And people almost worshiped this man because of his abilities. One evening, after a long day of surgery, Dr. Tom and my wife and I were sitting in Dr. Tom's living room. It had been a long day for him, hot in this surgery. It was just one of those long, long days, and at the end of it, it was just about dark. We were there, and we were having a long, cool drink and talking about his time there in the hospital. And he had seen many things. And this particular evening, he was telling us about strange things that he had seen, and one case in particular stood out for him. A number of months ago, young parents brought their young child with them to the hospital. The child couldn't walk. The child was totally unable to walk, and the parents had to either carry him in a wheelbarrow, which they did, or sometimes they'd pick him up and carry him. They had to come several days from their village to take their child to Tom in the belief that Tom could fix him. The kid's legs didn't work. And so Tom received him into the surgery and checked him out and said to the parents, "I think we need to do some x-rays so I can see what I need to do." Well, unfortunately, the x-rays, of course, showed that the young boy had congenital hip problems. And on the x-rays, you could see that there was very little bone on the hip joints. And so the child's legs were loose and didn't fit properly, and he was in a great deal of pain. And there was no bone for Tom to work with. And he said to the parents, "I'm afraid I can't help you. Your son will never walk. I cannot cure him. I cannot fix him." Well, the parents couldn't believe it. He was famous for this. He was famous for fixing people. They were very upset. And they took their son away in the wheelbarrow back to their village, very disappointed that the famous healer could no longer heal. It was weeks after they left that the hospital staff began to hear stories from villagers coming to the hospital about something unusual happening in the far remote part of the area. What they were saying was a man had appeared, a tall, bearded man, wearing flowing white robes, accompanied by 10 or 12 men who helped him. And this man was a preacher. And he would come and he would gather people in a village together and he would preach. Seemingly he was preaching a Christian gospel story. But he had one other thing that the villagers were attracted to. At the end of his preaching, he would gather together some of the sick in the village and he would talk to them. And for some, he would lay hands upon them. And the villagers coming to the hospital would talk about the people who were miraculously cured. Now, our friend Dr. Tom was a surgeon, a very practical man. He didn't buy any of this stuff about miracles. He didn't buy any of this stuff about a holy man who could heal anybody. And he became very skeptical. But the stories built and built. And now people were talking about the healer and the preacher all the time. Being the kind of gentleman he was, he decided, I'm going to make a note of the stories. And he began to make notes of what they were telling him in a scribbler. And on that particular evening, he took the scribbler and he showed us the number of the pages and pages of stories that he had recorded. And then to prove his point about the boy that I had told you about, out of a brown envelope, he pulled 2 x-rays and he held them up for us to look at. And clearly in the x-rays you could see there were no bones whatsoever that the hips could work with. There was no cartilage. Everything was gone. And he said, you can see why. I had nothing to work with. Well, the reputation of this preacher grew and grew. And what started out as maybe 10 or 12 people coming together and then maybe a whole village to listen to the preacher, the hospital staff began to hear of hundreds gathering. And in some instances, while we were there, we heard stories of thousands of people gathering where this man was preaching and healing. And as you can imagine, a person who both preached and healed was a very interesting personality, and he gathered people to him. And Dr. Tom, ever the skeptic, was not sure what to make of it, but he wanted to know more about it. And he decided that he would embark upon a scientific experiment if he could to find out. But he didn't have a chance to do it because something interesting happened. One day, the young parents brought their young boy back to the hospital. But this time, the boy was walking with a cane, but walking nevertheless. And they went up to Dr. Tom in his surgery and they said, this is my son, look, he has been healed by the preacher. And Tom sort of couldn't believe it. That's just not possible. Medical science says it's not possible. He said to them, would you mind if I x-rayed your son? They said, no, of course. And so we x-rayed them. And when Tom was telling us the story, he went to another envelope and he pulled out 2 more x-rays. And he held them up for us to look at. And they were the hip joints of this child, but now there was bone and cartilage, and it was almost normal, not quite. And Tom looked at it and he marveled. He said to us, this I don't understand. It's impossible. How could this have happened? But I saw it with my own eyes. This boy, according to the parents, they took him in a wheelbarrow to the healer. And the healer sought him out and went over and laid his hands upon the boy's hips and prayed a bit. He moved his hands and said to the child, you may get up now. And the boy gets up for the first time ever, starts to walk, His parents come and support him. He starts walking. And according to the parents, he didn't need the wheelbarrow. And there he was now, in Tom's surgery. And he had absolutely no idea how it happened. That's a true story. I was there. I saw it. I heard about it. And so, my listeners, here's the question. Was it fate? Was it fortune? Or was it something else entirely different?